أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Assalamu alaikum everybody and welcome to video 2 in this 7-part series of سبعا من المثاني, the 7 often repeated ones, focusing on the 7 shortest surahs of the Quran because these ones are the ones that we most often recite in the salah. Or not everybody does, of course. Some people recite very long surahs, and as they should, but in terms of the first surahs that we learn, and perhaps are most often repeated by most Muslims, I would say. So this is the second one in our series. The previous one in the series was on Surah al-Fatiha. This is on Surah al-Asr, and then our next ones will be on Surah al-Kawthar, and then the four Quls, Surah al-Kafirun, Surah al-Ikhlas, Surah al-Falaq, and Surah al-Nas. So what I want to do is not provide a tafsir, but provide an Arabic language student's analysis and perspective of Surah al-Asr. So let's get into it. So it begins with wal-Asr. The Arabic language students of the world usually learn that wa means and it does mean and. However, there's another type of waw in the Arabic language which is known as waw al-qasam. It is the waw of taking oaths, and Allah takes many oaths in the Quran. He says, wa-shamsi, by the sun, wal-fajri, by the dawn or the daybreak or the fajr time. He says, wat-teen, by the fig, right? And you'll notice that this waw puts the following word in the jar case. So that's why you usually hear wallahi if someone swears by Allah, wallahi, right? So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins this surah with wal asri, okay? Swearing by asr, by time. Now there are a number of different words for time in the Arabic language that are used for different purposes. So maybe the most common one is waqt, which is a very generic term for time, for waqt. So waqt is one. There's another one which is an, actually. You know when we say al-ana to mean now, it actually means like the time, which means now, right? The same way that saying al-yawma, the day, means today. So there are other words, even a mudda as well, is like a period of time, or a zaman is like a period of time. You might say zaman, like a time of a particular event or a particular like era in history. Asr can also mean that. When we talk about like the history, the timeline of Arabic literature, for example, you might say Asr Sadr al-Islam or Asr al-Abbasi, like the Abbasid period, the Asr of whatever, right? Al-Mamluki or Al-Asr al-whatever, right? The certain period of that time. But perhaps the significance here is that these root letters, Ayn, Sad, and Ra, are often to do with something being squeezed. The word asir itself meaning a juice. Asir is because it's squeezed in some way. And there's another word that Allah uses in the Quran for the clouds, al-mu'asirat. Al-mu'asirat, from these same root words as well, giving the imagery of like the clouds having the water squeezed out of them perhaps. So what Allah is saying here is wal asr, by the time which is squeezed. Okay, perhaps, right? So the thing that we're thinking about here is how we are missing out on our time, how our time is being squeezed by the things that we're doing. Time is really very short. Innal insana, indeed mankind. Innal insana lafi khusrin. Okay, so we'll focus on the Arabic language stuff. So we've had by time. If it was wal asru, by the way, it would mean and time. Wal asru would be and time, right? This would be the waw al-atf. This would be the joining together and, the waw meaning and, right? So wal asri. Indeed al-insana. Inna and her sisters are a category of words in the Arabic language that make their ism, usually the word that comes directly after them, in what we call the nasab case, or has a fatha on it. So innal insana. You'll also hear inna Allaha sami'un basir, for example. Indeed, Allah is hearing and hearing and seeing. Sami'un basir. So the same way we would have inna Allaha, here we have innal insana. Inna simply meaning indeed. It's just it's something that we use to give emphasis. Indeed, mankind is what? La fi khusrin. The la is for more emphasis as well. Grammatically, it would still fit if you just said innal insana fi khusr. Indeed, mankind is in khusr. But this inna and then la is used quite often in the Quran to give extra emphasis to the inna before it. Yeah, it's used in Surah al-Munafiqun as an example that comes to mind. Inna al-munafiqina lakadhibun. That indeed the hypocrites, lakadhibun, they are liars. So here we have inna al-insana, indeed mankind is verily, fi meaning in, khusrin. Why is it khusrin? Because it comes after fi, which is a preposition or a harf jar. Ma ma'na khusr? What does khusr mean? What's the meaning of khusr? These root letters again, kha, sin and ra, are to do with losing out on something. Often it's translated as the word losers, like al-khasirun, for example, of the losers, or al-akhsarin, the people who have lost out on something. And it's often translated as losers, which, being an Englishman, growing up in England, it kind of makes me laugh a little bit, because like if you call someone a loser at school, it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as this. Like if you're in khusr, it means you have literally lost out on something. Right, and it's obviously in reflection in this case to time. Right, you are missing out. We are in loss when it comes to our time. Right, because we're surely losing time on lots of things. Indeed, mankind is in loss, except who? Illa alladhina, except those who amanu. The illa means except. We've seen it many times. It's very useful. La ilaha illallah. There is no ilah, no deity worthy of worship. Illallah, except Allah, for example. Illa meaning except. Illa who? Alladhina, those who amanu, those who have believed. Alladhina amanu is a really common structure in the Quran, particularly after Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, after Ya ayyuha. It doesn't mean oh believers, because believers is an ism, is a noun, it would be mu'minun. But here it's amanu, oh those who have believed. All those who have believed. So it is actually a fi'l al-madi. It's actually a past tense verb being used here. I don't want to project any sort of opinions on it, but kind of a benefit that it has for us as people who aspire to be believers, it being used in the past tense, is that Allah's reminding you, you have believed, but you have to keep on proving that you believe. Right? Saying that you are believers would give the impression that it's guaranteed that you will always be a believer. The term mu'min is almost like timeless, isn't it? Like an ism is void of time. So alladhina amanu are those of you who have believed, but do you still believe? Right? It's kind of an implied thought that's going on here. So those who have believed and what? وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and they have done as-salihat, they have done righteous deeds. Yes, salih, I quite like the translation of righteous for salih. So عَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, they have done as-salihati, they have done righteousnesses. As-salihat, why is as-salihat, why does it have a kasra on the end here? You would expect it to have a fatha if it is the maf'ul bihi of amilu. Well, this ending, this feminine plural ending at, it can never take fatha. You can never have al-muslimatan. You can never have that. You can never have al-muslimata. It is still in the case of nasab, as you would expect for the object of a verb, but these types of words express their nasab with a kasra. Okay, that's just how it works with these. If you want a number of examples of this, you can go to the end of the page of Surah al-Tahrim, end of the first page is how I think of it in my mind, but there's long ayat in that surah, so it's probably only like ayat 5 or 6 or something. Don't quote me on that, go and look at the first page inshallah. Allah gives a list of like 7 or 8 maybe of these ayat words, and none of them are ayat 10. It's muslimatin, mu'minatin, qanitatin, ta'ibatin, abidatin. All these in endings, as is customary for as-salihati, as we have here. And what else? Watawasaw. This is also a fi'l, it's a verb, from the verb tawasa yatawasa, meaning to enjoin one another upon something. I think that's a nice translation of it. And you tawasa bi something. A useful thing for the Arabic language students to think about with tawasa is the form that it's in. We call this tafa'ala pattern. We call it form 6 in some programs, but more classic programs, like in the Arabic-speaking world, they won't call it like al-wazn as-sadis. They don't call it like the 6th form or something. I've certainly never seen that in the Arab world anyway. They'll just call it the wazn tafa'ala. So this pattern is usually to do with something being reciprocated between groups, usually, and is usually used in the plural for that reason. So, for example, we see a verb just like this in عَمَّ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. تساءل is on the same kind of pattern as تواصى. عَمَّ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ is about what? Are they asking one another? يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. There's lots of very useful verbs that are like that. We have تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. تعاون is the same pattern as تساءل, which is the same as تواصى. تعاونوا means cooperate, to help one another. Very nice. So tawasa bih something is to cooperate or enjoin one another into what? Al-haq. Enjoin one another bil-haq. Enjoin one another to the truth, to al-haq. Watawasaw, and they enjoined one another to as-sabr. They enjoined one another to as-sabr. I like steadfastness for sabr. Sabr is often translated to peace, or sorry, not peace, to patience rather, not peace, to patience, right? But I think patience in the English language gives a feeling of sort of passiveness to it, really. But I mean, steadfastness is to do with like encountering difficulties. You know, you come across, difficulties, whatever it be in your life, and you're steadfast through those difficulties. That's more like sabr. I mean, when we say the word patience, I get a feeling of like sitting in a GP's waiting room patiently with sort of nothing going on. But sabr can be that, but it can also be, steadfastness in the face of difficulties befalling you. So let me go through the ayat once again, just to kind of round up the new vocab that we've learnt, and then we'll end there, inshallah. Wal-Asr, or fully vowed, wal-Asri. Right? On the end of ayat, it's just a tajweed rule that you don't have to pronounce the haraka on the end of the ayat if you're stopping there. So, wal-asr, or written wal-asri, by time. Innal insana lafi khusr. Indeed, mankind is certainly la fi in khusr, in loss. Illa, except alladhina amanu, those who have believed. Wa amilu salihati, and they have done righteous deeds. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, and they enjoined one another to the truth, and they enjoined one another to as-sabr. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, they enjoined one another upon steadfastness. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Arabic with Sam podcast. May Allah bless you guys with the most beautiful Arabic. And please, my brothers and sisters, do not forget to include our dear brothers and sisters suffering in Palestine, as well as in Sudan, in Kashmir, in Lebanon, and in other places around the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make their affairs easy for them and deliver them from this hardship. Allahumma ameen. Assalamu alaikum.